advertising agency, and I was all of 19 and I was doing very well. And when I'd gone to the academy, the National Academy, to visit my brother, who was a Foreign Service probationer there, he just told me, he said, you can go back on Monday morning and you can be sacked. So I said, why should anyone sack me? So he said, because you're the junior most and you're in the private sector. They can do anything to you. Besides, why are you not working at a national level? Why are you just selling sausages and towels and things like that? So I said, what do you have in mind? He said, well, you could sit for the competitive examinations. But then he added, it's beyond you, forget it. If he hadn't said that, it's beyond you, forget it. My English and my ability to be conversational and all that, the confidence I had gained through school and college, were not going to take me through life. That I had, in the very, very early stages of my career, two very different but extremely exacting bosses. If I had not had those bosses, I don't know if I would have become as obsessed and as intoxicated with one mission. What difference is your work making to people's lives? Not your minister's life, not your secretary's life, not your boss's life, not your family's life. What difference is it making to people's life? All through my career, I learned the hard way that you have to be assertive. But in the beginning, I was a bit of a doormat, yes. In India, you're going to do intraocular lenses at the district level. How are you going to bring people? It's not going to work. That is when I had visited Madurai, the Arvind Eye Hospital, and I saw it in flesh and blood, Dr. G. Venkat Swami, how he was doing it. And he became, for me and for the program, a kind of a beacon of light of how to do it. We had many seminars, workshops to understand the model. And it worked. And I was only a joint secretary. It took a huge paraphernalia of district collectors, ophthalmologists, all kinds of people to do it. But at the end of it, we did about 11 million cataract surgeries in 7 years in 7 states in the country. You can't get away from that. And if you see a competent woman and she is your boss, it is not acceptable most of the time. It is just treated as something that you have got this job by luck. You're not really all that competent. They test your competence and they can't test the competence.
Hello and welcome to Indian Masterminds. I'm excited to share something special with you today. Recently, my colleague Pallavi had the chance to speak with Shailaja Chandra, the first female Chief Secretary of Delhi. In part 1 of their conversation, Ms. Chandra shared how a comment from her brother motivated her to clear the UPSC exam. She also talked about her training days and the experiences that shaped her incredible journey. So let's dive into their conversation.
So first of all, thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us time and joining Indian Masterminds.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so ma'am, let's start from the beginning. What is your story of getting into IAS?
So the IAS, the story is not a very inspiring story, but it is something that happened. I was very happy doing copywriting in a very major advertising agency, and I was all of 19 and I was doing very well. And when I'd gone to the academy, the National Academy, to visit my brother, who was a Foreign Service probationer there, he just told me, he said, you can go back on Monday morning and you can be sacked. So I said, why should anyone sack me? So he said, because you're the junior most and you're in the private sector. They can do anything to you. Besides, why are you not working at a national level? Why are you just selling sausages and towels and things like that? So I said, what do you have in mind? He said, well, you could sit for the competitive examinations. But then he added, it's beyond you, forget it. If he hadn't said that, it's beyond you, forget it, I don't think I would have been challenged. I felt so annoyed that, it's taught so poorly. Yes, I was just a graduate. I had not even done post-graduation, and my background was so city-based and so urban and so sort of, Angrezi and no rural area background. So in a way, I was a misfit. But I said, what is there? The exam is an exam. So I studied on my own, and maybe that helped, studying on your own, because I was able to, in those days, writing everything was very important. There was nothing objective about it. And I got through first shot, which was at the age of 21, which was, quite unique.
Early. Yeah.
But it was not exactly the kind of background that the IAS needed. I did have an interview which went into 50% very good, 50% pretty not so good. But anyway, I made it into the IAS. And that is when I realized that I was, in a way, gifted to have something so precious in my hands. On the other hand, I knew very little about what was in store for me and had a lot to learn.
Right. So yeah, so this is clear that you have been into writing and all, so that's why these blogs and all. We'll talk about it later, but let's go through your journey first. So do you remember that when you got selected into IS, I think there were very few women in the academy and in the whole service. If you take whole UPSC CSC, then also मुझे लगता है चार
But 13 women in all and 7 in the IS. So
Okay.
It's very, very tiny.
Yeah. So do you remember your first day at the academy when you went there for training?
There was no first day because you had to settle into your room first and foremost. They gave you time to settle in. So there was no training or anything. You just glanced around and I was completely taken back by everybody in grey trousers and a academy blazer with a crest on it. Women, of course, didn't have that, so we could wear what we wanted to, but we were so rare because you can imagine in a batch of 140, if there were just 13 women and of the IAS only 7, obviously you stood out. So the first day was really, I had a roommate from West Bengal, Kader.
Okay.
And she was very, very fierce. She had very clear ideas about women's rights. She had very clear ideas about how you have to get your due and how you must not take nonsense from anyone. I had not been exposed to that. And that exposure was my first introduction to how women of substance should be relating to their surroundings, number one. Number two, I did realize that first day or whenever, when I looked around the lecture room, I said, I could see that very few people were from my kind of, let's say, background. I don't know, I came from a very modest civil servants family. I did not have any big family or wealth or anything like that. My mother was just a middle-level government servant and she was a widow. So we didn't have any great, you might say, things to fall back on in terms of social status. But certainly because of my education, I was confident. But when I looked around, I found that the kind of people who were around me were not people I could immediately relate to. So in the foundational course, first 4 months, it was very easy to settle in with people from your own background, people who had had that kind of English education, and you knew exactly when you cracked jokes, you knew the exact significance, and you could give a repartee, and conversations were very little sophisticated and things. It's when the foundational course was over and all the other services left, and we were just the IAS. That is when I had to spend my time with IAS officers for a change, not just IPS and IFS and all the other services. Yes. That is when I realized that I knew nothing. They knew a lot more. They were far more alive to the legal, constitutional, economic issues of the country than I was. Okay. So for me, it was a little bit of a come down because I did realize that, my English and my ability to be conversational and all that, the confidence I had gained through school and college were not going to take me through life. Okay. So I became friends with a lot of people who are still very close friends of mine. Where I realized that knowing what it is to work is very different in a milieu where you have, I didn't know what was political pressure. I did not know about caste, community, religion, all these issues which would surface in the career. And I learned through their conversations, their jokes. And I would say that academy apart, I think the fact that I had in the very, very early stages of my career, 2 very different but extremely exacting bosses. If I had not had those bosses, I don't know if I would have become as obsessed and as intoxicated with one mission, what difference is your work making to people's lives? Not your minister's life, not your secretary's life, not your boss's life, not your family's life. What difference is it making to people's life? That these two bosses taught me in their own way. One was extremely harsh, rude, extremely, I would say, not very tolerant of women. Certainly, I was the only woman in the group that we were working under. And he was quite intolerant of, he looked on me as some sort of a flippant woman and made it known also. The other was very kind and very
I'm sorry to interrupt, but made it known in what ways?
And he made it known because he would hold me as an example to be ridiculed. Publicly ridiculed in the front of all my colleagues, and everyone would laugh at me. And I did not know how to react because I was in such a minority. So I reacted when it went on a couple of times, too often in public. And then I was put in the doghouse. And all my colleagues told me, you were a big fool to have opened your mouth. You shouldn't have said anything. So I learned the hard way that if you want to take on something, you have to be prepared for it. Don't just react. Right. And it was a hard beginning, but because the boss changed, another one came, I learned other things, which was humility, which was complete lack of arrogance, which is respect for the citizen who comes to you is more important than the chair you sit on or you. That he taught, and he taught it by example. So these two things, one was the very strong, very effective, very result-oriented boss who also had his quirks about women officers. And the other was this very, very humble officer who taught one that not all your English, not all your confidence is going to take you anywhere if you have not really related to the problem the person faces, not the way you look at it. These were two very good things that happened very early on in my career, which changed the way I was accustomed to think.
So you were in AGMUT cadre, no?
I was in Maharashtra cadre and I had my training in Maharashtra. But because my mother had a tumor in the spinal cord and we had a house in Delhi, all those things, so I requested the chief secretary to let me go for a year on deputation to Delhi. And I had the marks, I had very high marks, so I could have got this cadre by rights. But I went to Maharashtra because I am a Maharashtrian. But as luck would have it, I met my husband, we got married, and he said, I'm not keen to change cadre. I opted for this cadre and I want to remain in this cadre. That's what happened.
Okay. So just on a lighter note, women on any level, maybe IS or IPS, they have to compromise according to your husband, I guess. पहले भी अभी भी it's happening ना when मतलब women have to settle down where their husbands are generally. In very few cases, I have seen that husband has changed his cadre or something, or even in private sector also, that husband is switching places to be with his wife because her job demands to be in certain place. So that's happened with you as well, I guess.
It happened to me also. I have no regrets because I'd had my schooling in Simla College in Delhi. So I was accustomed to Delhi. It wasn't new for me. But you are right, because I thought at that time that Maharashtra was a far bigger and a far more substantial place to be working in for life. And he did not. And I gave it. At that time, I did give it. There are not many times that I gave in all through my career. I learned the hard way that you have to be assertive. But in the beginning, I was a bit of a doormat, yes.
Right. So after Maharashtra, you came to Delhi. And do you remember which has been your the best posting so far, if you look back? I'll obviously come to Chief Secretary and all, but according to you, during your initial days or any time, which was more fulfilling to you?
I really can't pick one posting. Every single job I have held has been rewarding, has been productive. And you may think that it's just a fairy story, but it is not. I threw myself into whatever job was given to me and tried to make the most of it. I may not have risen and shone as much as if I had done some career maneuvering and all that. I went by whatever postings I was given. But I would say every single posting, I can tell you, gave me something different to do, something to achieve, something which was a tremendous success and also a failure. But every posting was special.
Do you
I don't think I can pick out
Do you
anything.
remember any incident? Because IAS works basically for public. You have public interaction. Some IAS, but some officers goes beyond, and to maintain that interaction, कुछ के लिए थोड़ा मुश्किल हो जाता है to continue that. But do you remember any of your public interaction where where you felt कि yeah, this is why I think I got into IAS? मतलब any compliment you got from public or any reception that you got from public? Any incident if you remember from your experiences?
I don't think public, I never looked for public appreciation, never. So with the result, I never got any such public awards and rewards and things like
No,
that.
but sometimes it happens. I'll tell you one story. I was talking to one of the district collector. I won't take his name, although it's in a good sense only. He said he was coming somewhere, and a old lady came to him, and she was asking, madam, she was actually struggling to get pension and all. And then he heard her saying that he is called his pension babu because he don't वो hang nahi karte hain. He'll give you that, so please go to him, he'll solve your problem. So that one thing got stuck into him, and he has made sure कि कोई भी उनके पास से खाली नहीं जाए when they are coming to him or approaching him for these kind of things, pensions or any kind of jo bhi government schemes hai. So that kind of, if you remember any incident, if it happened with your.
No, I can't say an incident, but I do what really gave me the most satisfaction was the blindness control program, which I did for the health ministry. I was a young joint secretary, and it had been rejected 3 times by the World Bank. And the secretary was very sort of dismissive and said to me, now let's see, aap kya kamal karke dikhati hain.
Okay.
And, so again, it was a challenge. And I set about it, and I decided that, one has to start bottom up. You don't know everything. You'll have to have experts guiding you. You'll have to talk to the state governments. You'll have to bring them on the board, not all 7 states only. And I did that, and I do remember that for the first time, the idea was that we would put intraocular lenses at the district level into villagers' eyes who would be transported to the district hospital. People with cataract who used to have those big black glasses and, camp surgeries, and many went wrong. So it was a challenge because people said, in India, you're going to do intraocular lenses at the district level. How are you going to bring people? It's not going to work. That is when I had visited Madurai, the Arvind Eye Hospital, and I saw it in flesh and blood, Dr. G. Venkat Swami, how he was doing it. And he became, for me and for the program, a kind of a beacon of light of how to do it. We had many seminars, workshops to understand the model, and it worked. And I was only a joint secretary. It took a huge paraphernalia of district collectors, ophthalmologists, all kinds of people to do it. But at the end of it, we did about 11 million cataract surgeries in 7 years in 7 states in the country. And that I remember the same secretary who said, देखिए आप क्या कमाल करके दिखाती हैं, said to me, तुमको तो जीवन के लिए पुण्य मिलेगा, क्योंकि इतने लोगों की eyesight आपके काम से ये हो गया. That's all. It was a compliment. That's all.
Yeah, so it was in the year?
It was in the year 1994. It was negotiated with World Bank in 94. And it is still, I think, it went on into blindness 1, blindness 2, maybe even blindness 3, I don't know. But then the intraocular lenses being done by the government free of cost or at a very nominal cost, and carrying people to the where the equipment is needed, not doing camp surgeries, became a way of life in India. And it's something that the World Bank even noted as among the most successful projects ever undertaken.
Right. So this was your first posting in health ministry?
Yes, it was my first posting. And I continued in health ministry as joint secretary, additional secretary. And my first promotion, I was made secretary in charge of Indian systems of medicine. It was very much part of the health ministry. It became Ayush ministry only in 2014, long after I had left.
Yeah. And you also were the health secretary for the central government for how many years? Were
No,
you
I told you I was Ayush secretary, which was
also
a part
Ayush
of the health
ministry?
ministry. I was a secretary like other secretaries. It was
Okay.
not a ministry at that time. Yes, so I was there for about 2.5 years as in that capacity. But since I'd had 7 years of public health, medical education, hospitals, all those things, I
Hmm.
think I was blessed because I had the knowledge of both sides.
Right. So you have served in, I guess, defense also, power and health, mostly in health. So which has been the most satisfying experience? Health, apart from health, power and defense. And how
I
was
think it's impossible for an IAS officer to say what is satisfactory.
right?
Every single sector gives you a completely different set of experiences. For instance, defense was a world of its own, a
Hmm.
world which civilians do not even know about. And I realized how structured they are, how organized they are, how top down they are. It's a very unified hierarchy.
Hmm.
And the discipline through which they work is really quite remarkable. It cannot work in a civilian setup, but it was an exposure as to how discipline and
Hmm.
disciplined way of administering things can be a success. But it is a world of its own. It cannot be superimposed into the civilian world at
Yeah,
all. But
they
that
have
was
their
a
own
great
order.
exposure. Hmm?
Right. They have their own order or agar
They
wo
have their own order, and I had my own ups and downs as a woman because again I was very very rare to have a woman in that ministry and at that in those years, and I don't think those stories are worth telling, but the fact is that one had to be pretty assertive
right.
on paper and across the table. Yes.
Right. So and then you became the first female chief secretary of Delhi.
Yes,
So
I had been in power also as joint secretary, and that was also very rewarding because if you once see the implication that the core sector is power,
hmm,
steel,
right.
railways, they decide your economy, they decide
Um,
development in a much larger way than doing, say, a blindness program or doing
right.
something, specific in the education or something. It is huge.
Yeah.
And it is cross-cutting for the country's development. So to have had the occasion to work over there in that ministry, I think you come to terms with what is important in the much larger context than a small context, which is equally important from a people's point of view.
Mhm.
But unless you have the macro picture, you don't realize the importance of the micro picture that you deal with. So I think that was a great, great learning experience. And I benefited a lot because those were decisions taken at a very high level. So you got exposed very early on. As far as chief secretary is concerned, after having done health ministry and Ayush and all, I was made chief secretary Delhi, and I would say I don't think it was difficult because I was coming with the background of the government of India, which
Yeah.
is very unusual. No, very few people become chief secretary after being secretary to government of India.
Yeah.
But so I had that, you might say one had that status of having worked at a very senior level in the government of India. So people did not take you lightly. People
Like
knew you came with credentials. On the other hand, I did have problems because I had about 6 or 7 male colleagues who had been my colleagues for the last 30, 35 years. And they were my colleagues and friends and allies and associates. And how do they suddenly become my subordinates?
hmm.
So I had to face a certain amount of I wouldn't say, little remarks, a little bit of being extra familiar,
Hmm.
or in a meeting trying to crack a joke, which is not really proper when you are addressing the person who's chairing the meeting, all
Right.
that. So I realized that, look, this can't go on because this kind of, you might say, veiled way of undermining you will continue. So I just took the bull by its horns. I said, I'll go and meet each one of them in their rooms. And I
Hmm.
offered them, I said, would you like another posting so that you don't have to work directly with me? Because we have to carry on. You are here, I'm here. We can't change that. So what can I do for you?
Hmm.
So they told me, they said, why don't you put me in the Delhi Transport Corporation? Somebody said, why don't you put me in the Delhi Finance Corporation? I'll not be under you. I said, yeah. So I told the chief minister and the lieutenant governor, I said, see, for the sake of having some amount of frictionless governance, and also having good camaraderie between officers. It's not good if this continues. So it is better they go where they would like to, where they are going to contribute without having anything directly to do with me. So fortunately, both of them agreed and they got the postings they wanted. And I was given then a free hand, largely, I wouldn't say totally. Junior colleagues could also try and, push the envelope quite a bit to see whether they could get away with, being a little facetious or,
again, I am interrupting, but I really don't understand this kind of thing from a male colleague and all. Agar yahi cheez flipped hoti, like you were working under them, I don't think so ki you would have asked for, free hand, or you would have any problem, or any women have any problem to work under a man who has been their colleague or friend or extra familiar. So why do you think this happens actually? Because it's right now it's also real. This problem is real actually. We see in corporates, we see in bureaucracy, governments, everywhere. So why do you think? What is the reason?
The male ego is very big. You can't get away from that.
Right.
And if you see a competent woman and she is your boss, it is not acceptable most of the time.
Right.
It is just treated as something that you have got this job by luck. You're not really all that competent. They test your competence and they can't test the competence because they are not my bosses. So the best way is to belittle you in ways which are hurtful, but you can't make an issue on every thing that happens around you.
If you want to work, so you need to, keep ignoring few things, little things. That's why I asked you, because now this always comes up, first female secretary or first female IPS officer. So I wanted to know how challenging or difficult is it to be first in anything? And does it ease the path for the upcoming generation of females, especially, who are going to take that seat?
I think it helps other women to see that women can rise to certain positions, they can be effective, they can deliver, and they themselves get very inspired. Not my story, every story of a woman who breaks some ceiling or the other, it inspires others. And therefore, it is very important that we share those stories and we take a very positive view of how we can turn the table to our advantage, not to become other people's bosses. That is not the thing, but to outshine others simply by doing things differently and doing them well. And women do have the capacity to do things completely differently. I mean, everybody knows women multitask. So you don't sit in a meeting and talk only about that meeting. You get 4 things done simultaneously by just telling someone, "Arey, tumko yaar tumhe bola tha na, ye kyun nahi kiya na?" This goes on because your mind is going in different directions. It may be considered to be a shortcoming, but I think it is not a shortcoming. Women have this ability, this knack, and they can get a lot of things sorted out on the staircase, on the lift, because they're able to use that moment quickly to get something to move ahead. So I don't think that women are extremely successful if only they're given more opportunities and not treated as, I'm sorry, but the fan is getting into my eye. That is why there's tears, not for any other reason.
No, I'm no problem. And during your, you were also chairperson of committee to suggest changes to address current policy and legal gaps in Delhi private schools.
Yes, I was, and I took it very seriously. I must say that I must have related to more than 100 or 150 people, meaning groups from schools, different kinds of schools. And it was mostly for private schools because the act is for private schools, not for government schools, the Delhi School Education Act and Rules 1973. And I had given a lot of suggestions as to how private schools there can be better oversight, both of fees, of performance, of doing things which are more modern. There is a better system, a professional system of inspections, and everything is transparently available on the website. You cannot change fees without a committee being able to assess what is the infrastructure change you have brought about, what are the different things that you did which were different from the year before you raise the fee last. And that would be done professionally. You cannot just say that I did this. And you cannot get money for saying, I will do this. You will get money for what you have done. So all this is possible, and you can have an oversight done by an inspection group, a professional group. And I've given an example of how this can be done from the UK. The UK is not something it just happened to be that I was given that understanding of the UK system of inspection at that time. I don't know today. I mean, it was very inspiring as to how inspections can be done to look at student outcomes. And I had recommended that that be done because that is the only way you can really assess a school. It isn't by the granite and the marble and the kind of air conditioning or the kind of spit and polish. It is much to do with a completely different understanding of the whole system of education. And I had given those. It's a 3-volume report, but I don't think I gave it to Sheila Dikshit, frankly, and she didn't like some of it. She liked some of it. I don't think she left the government in 2014 and the new government took over. I don't think that report has been really looked at, and if it has not been acted.
Yeah, ma'am, because the prices of private schools are still skyrocketing. Whether
it can be contained, it can be taken care of, and we've given a complete idea how it should be done based upon examples, not based upon my bright ideas.
Even today, we were discussing one news from, I think, Madhya Pradesh, Bhind. There one guy approached the district collector saying कि nursery or KG or I don't know, class 2 की books that he has bought in something 2.5k rupees, and all are of private publications. And then they were asking 500 more for the copies, because nowadays you must be seeing all the copies are customized. The only school provides, they have a designated shop. If they are not organizing their own book fair or stall to give away the books to the students, they have designated shops. It's not the problem only in Delhi. In small cities, like I come from Bihar, Muzaffarpur, there also we had one shop only. There we could get the books for our school. Dusre schools mein wo milegi nahi. So how do you think these problems, these can be handled?
It can be handled. They can be handled because the Act and the rules give you enough authority. You just have to exercise it. You have to make regulations. That's all. And you should do it, because why should a person be blackmailed into buying something specifically? And if it has to be bought from a designated place, there has to be some oversight, and the prices are commensurate with what the goods being given are.
But then there are private schools who do not, since NCERT, I'm not sure if NCERT is compulsory for all CBSE or not. I'm not sure. But I think the guideline says that every school should opt for NCERT. But generally, the private schools don't, especially in initial classes, they have their own publications, a deal hoti hogi or something like that. So NCERT is not in their curriculum. So ये भी तो किया जा सकता है that NCERT is made compulsory in every book, a school that goes through CBSE or maybe state boards also, अगर उनकी अपनी books है तो लोगों को ज़्यादा बेवजह पैसे नहीं खर्च करने पड़ेंगे उन books के लिए जिसका actually कुछ ज़्यादा concrete, they don't have that concrete things in it, just they demand higher prices to look fancy and all. So,
I agree. I totally agree, and it is doable. But it has to be on the agenda of a government to do it. And NCERT or State Textbook Bureau, there's been always a controversy on this. It depends. The Education Ministry will have its own point of view. The other schools, whether it be the Delhi board or the Goa board or the Tamil Nadu board, they all have their own. But certainly government has a duty and a responsibility to see that people don't get away with nonsense. And it can be done. The law is there. The ability to do this is there. And you can sit across the table and come to an understanding with all schools together. So there's a common denominator. It is not as though A can do something and B can do something. It's wrong. And the schooling of children should not become a burden on the parents in this kind of fashion.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
So that was Shailaja Chandra on her UPSC journey. Part 2 of this conversation is coming very soon, so stay tuned to Indian Masterminds, and I'll see you in the next one.